Hello, my name is Tori Neese, and today I'll be discussing tantrums. If you have young children, especially under the age of 5, I'm sure you really know what it's like for a kid to throw a tantrum. So today I'll be discussing 3 main points. Why do children have tantrums? How can we handle tantrums? And what are some ways that we can actually prevent tantrums? I hope that this video can benefit you and make your life a little bit easier when it comes to handling tantrums. So before we get started, I wanted to share a few ways that parents say they deal with tantrums. Some of these ways are funny, but some of these are some ways that we can actually relate to that we may have done in the past as well. If your child's throwing a tantrum, just give them a good old-fashioned spanking. If your child's throwing a tantrum and biting, just bite them back. If your child's throwing a tantrum, just completely ignore it. If your child's throwing a tantrum, just give them a piece of candy. So these may be ways that you're familiar with in dealing with tantrum. However, today I'm going to be discussing ways that I feel are more effective in dealing with tantrums. So to get started, I want to discuss why it is that children have tantrums. One big reason that children have tantrums is because every child's temperament is different. So if your child has a temperament to where they cannot deal with stressful situations easily, they're more likely to have tantrums and more intense tantrums. They can become very frustrated very easily. So that's important to consider what kind of temperament your child has. Another reason that children have tantrums is actually a quite simple reason. A reason that actually is why we get frustrated. They're stressed out, they're tired, or they're hungry. So if your child had a stressful day, they didn't get enough sleep, or they didn't get enough to eat, it's going to be really hard for them to express their feelings throughout the day because they're going to be very frustrated. Another way that children have tantrums is because they're not able to cope. As adults, we have a lot of coping mechanisms, but as a child, your coping mechanisms are very small. So when they become frustrated, they don't have the communication that we do to express their feelings. So oftentimes they just have tantrums. For example, if they're playing with a child and they're supposed to be sharing their toy and they don't want to, instead of expressing how they feel, oftentimes they'll just throw a fit. Another reason that children have tantrums is because they're overstimulated. This is a reason that we may not think about. Overstimulation can happen like at a grocery store. If it's a really busy day at a grocery store, there's a lot going on and a lot of shoppers, that's a lot for a child to process. And all of that processing can make a child very frustrated and cause them to act out. So what are some ways that we can handle tantrums? A big way that we need to handle tantrums is to be calm. That's a lot easier said than done. And sometimes we just need to at least act calm even if we don't feel calm. If your child's angry, one of the worst things you can do is to react angry back. That's just going to escalate the situation. The best thing you can do is have a calm but stern voice and be very deliberate in how you handle the situation. Make sure you're cautious in how you handle the situation so you're not acting out in anger. Make sure your child knows that you're very serious but that they're not going to get a rise out of you. Another way you can handle tantrums is to acknowledge why the tantrum is happening. This can be easier in your home versus in public. So to acknowledge the tantrum, you can talk to your child about why they're having a tantrum. What's making them feel that way? Why are they upset? And get them to discuss what kind of emotions they have. This can be good because this can help the child realize if they should be angry or if they should calm down. This is easier to do at home because in the store, oftentimes you need to act quickly or in public. Another way you can handle a tantrum that's better to do at home as well is to ignore it. If your child's having a tantrum, sometimes they're having a tantrum just to get attention from you or get a reaction. So if the child's not harming themselves or anybody else, just let the tantrum run its course and ignore it. This shows that the child's not going to get attention for throwing a fit. Again, this is easier to do at home. In the store, it might not be a good idea to ignore it since the child might be very, very loud. Another way to handle tantrums is to be very consistent. Once you find the way that you're going to have a consequence for tantrums, stick with it. If in the store the way you handle tantrums is to take your child to the bathroom to have a timeout, do that every time. If your consistency changes and sometimes you give the child a piece of candy instead of getting their consequence, the child could then gamble on having tantrums or not. Maybe the child will have more tantrums because they feel like they won't get in trouble for it. So it's very important that you're consistent in how you handle the tantrums so the child knows that it is not okay for them to throw tantrums and that they will have a consequence for that tantrum. Lastly, I'd like to talk about preventing tantrums. Preventing tantrums is great because that's less tantrums your child has to go through and less tantrums you have to deal with. One of the ways that we can prevent tantrums is to reduce tiredness and stress. Make sure your child has enough naps that they need to where they feel well rested. Make sure your child gets enough sleep during the evenings too. Also, make sure that there's the least amount of stress as you can during your day. Try not to get as angry and try not to yell as much. This will make your child feel more calm and make you feel more calm and put more peace in the situation to where tantrums might not happen as much. Another big way that you can prevent tantrums is to understand what triggers tantrums. If you can figure out what are some of the things that trigger your child to have a tantrum, that can be great in preventing tantrums. For instance, if your child has a favorite show that when you turn off, they tend to throw a fit, maybe it's best to talk to your child before you turn it off. You could tell them, after this episode, we're going to turn it off. Or, we might have to leave the house today, so we might have to turn it off in the middle of the show. Maybe talking to them can help them be ready for the show to be turned off to reduce the tantrum. Another example is if your child goes to the store before they take a nap or have a snack and they tend to throw a fit, maybe it's best they take a nap and have a snack before the store so that they can be more well rested. Another way we can prevent tantrums is to identify your child's emotions and talk about their emotions. Schedule time with your child to just talk about their emotions. Ask them, what are some things that upset you? What are some things that make you happy? Getting them to talk about their emotions can be really important when it comes to tantrums. Because when they do throw a tantrum, you could revisit those conversations and say, I don't remember you saying this is one of the things that upset you. And remind them what really does upset them and maybe what are some things that they're just throwing fits about. One of the best and biggest ways you can prevent tantrums is being very proactive. This is actually a really fun way too to prevent tantrums because you can become very creative. One way that I heard of that I really like is setting up a grocery store in your own home. You can get food items from your kitchen and put them on shelves and have your child walk around. And while they're in their little store, you can be teaching them what's appropriate to do in a store and what's not. This is great because when you do go to the store, you could revisit that and say, do you remember? That's not how we acted in our store. This can make your child feel like a really big part of the shopping experience, and this can reduce a lot of tantrums. I hope that this video was very beneficial, and I really appreciate you taking your time to watch it. Just remember that everybody has children that go through tantrums, so you're not alone. And I hope and wish that you and your child would have the best of luck. Thanks so much.